York Game Day continues right here on 880 ESPN New York and the ESPN New York app alongside Mike Tannenbaum. My name is Jake Asman. We take you till noon. We just went around the league, and right now, let's start to look ahead to what will be a pivotal offseason for both the Jets and the Giants, and certainly the Jets, as they are likely going to be trying to figure out how they could get their next franchise quarterback. Can it be done? And joining us right now for more on that is ESPN NFL draft analyst Matt Miller, who this week posted a fascinating first mock draft that had the New York Jets trading up from number 4 to number 1 to draft Fernando Mendoza from Indiana. So, Matt, we really appreciate you joining us. I want to start there. Give us the breakdown on what led you to, in your first mock, come up with that trade scenario for the Jets to jump up and get their guy.
Yeah, guys, I think we can look historically at when a team starts to load up with draft capital the way the Jets have, trading Sauce Gardner, trading Quinton Williams. You're not doing that to draft a wide receiver. You're not doing that to draft a middle linebacker. You're only giving up superstar caliber players when you're trying to go get a quarterback. So I think it does make sense to look at what this new front office, this new regime is going to do and say, whether it's this year or next, they're going to go get that quarterback. And with Fernando Mendoza playing so well in his first year at Cal, with guys like Dante Moore continuing to play really, really well at Oregon, it does seem like the Jets have realized that you can have a great defense, you can have a great wide receiver, but if you don't have a quarterback, it really doesn't matter.
Hey, Matt, thanks for joining us. Can you give us an overview of the quarterback position beyond Mendoza?
Yeah, Mike, it's a little bit light this year, just honestly. You know, a lot of the guys that we expected to be top-tier players back in August have struggled, you know, and so guys like Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller, even Arch Manning, Cade Klubnik, Carson Beck, they have not lived up to expectations. So Mendoza, as the lone senior in this class, there's a reason that he's being talked about as a top 5 pick. Then you get into interesting players like Ty Simpson at Alabama, who is a first-year starter. And something we've talked about before, Mike, you want 25 starts from these quarterbacks. He's going to be well below that. Even if Alabama makes a run, he's not going to get to 25 starts. Then we have Dante Moore at Oregon, who started 5 games at UCLA in 2023, transfers to the Ducks and sits behind Dylan Gabriel for a year. Now he's starting, so he's going to be maybe closer to 20 games, depending on the run that they make at Oregon this year. Those are the 3 quarterbacks that you hear consistently around the league have first-round grades, first-round talent. I think after that, you get into a question mark like Lenore Sellers from South Carolina, who has traits for days but hasn't played up to those. Those traits haven't led to production. And I think we're all a little snake bit from Anthony Richardson and players like that who we've seen the traits, we've seen the potential, but we don't see the production or the processing ability on Saturdays. So he is a media darling for sure, but when I talk to scouts, he's not seen as a first-round player.
Matt, in your mock, you do have Moore, of course, declaring and coming out, but I know there's been a lot of rumors around Dante Moore potentially sticking in school for at least another year. From what you have heard, what is the latest on Moore? Do you anticipate when it's all said and done, if he's thought to be maybe a top 10 pick, he would declare and come out?
I do think that there's a chance he would come out. You know, we're to that time of year where family members and agents want to start asking questions, right? If where would this player be ranked if they come out? Where are they going to go? I think for Moore, it is a little more interesting than some of the other guys because he has jumped around a little bit. You know, he was at UCLA. He does go to Oregon and sit for a year. So he's a little bit of an older prospect by nature of that. In terms of how long he's been in college, he's actually only 20 years old right now, which is a really cool thing about looking at him as a potential draft prospect. But as well as he's played even yesterday, you know, he had 1 pick yesterday, but just his poise in the pocket, how seamless he is, how smooth he is and accurate, makes me think that because there is that gap this year, there's not that prospect like Caleb Williams or Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck that we've been tracking for years. There is that gap, and I think that gives someone like Moore the opportunity to jump up there and be that number 1 quarterback if he were to come out.
And what positions do you think, Matt, are strong in this year's draft?
I think you got to look at the defensive line, honestly. You know, it is a light year on offense in terms of depth and top-end talent. But on defense, you know, you have guys like Arvell Reese from Ohio State who's playing as well as anyone in the country right now. And he is a truly elite prospect. He's going to give you some of that Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter versatility as a stack linebacker or as a rusher off the edge. Ruben Bain from Miami, another pass rusher who's playing exceptionally well. If they actually gave the Heisman to just the best player in college football, both of those guys would be in the running. So it's a really good edge class. Defensive tackle Peter Woods from Clemson is a good player. He's going to be probably a top 10 to 12 pick. There's not that second tier in terms of defensive tackles, but the edge group and the linebacker group are actually really, really good.
Matt Miller is our guest here on New York Game Day. Jake Asman, Mike Tannenbaum with you. Matt, of course, covers the NFL for ESPN, has an awesome mock draft out on ESPN.com that we were discussing. One other point on just the Jets making that deal, Matt, that Mike T and I were discussing earlier in the show. The costs for the Jets to actually move up, say they're at 4 or 5 when it's all said and done. In your mock, you have the Jets, of course, trading their own one with the Titans and then trading the Colts first rounder they acquired from the Sauce Gardner deal and a second in 2027. What was that cost based on? Because we've seen so many different trades over the years where sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. How did you calculate what the trade value would be if the Jets did want to make that type of deal?
Yeah, usually I try to look at historic trades and not base this on a whim or like what I think the market might be. I think you can even look at the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart. That's almost starting to be a little bit outdated at this point. So what we can do is look at trades that have happened recently when teams have gone up to that number one spot, what they've paid. Similarly with the other trade that I had in this mock with teams moving out of that spot because they don't need a quarterback. That allows the Jets, looking at what teams have done in the past, even several years ago, you have the Niners and Bears swapping picks 2 and 3, but that the cost changes when a quarterback is involved. So I think even with the number one pick, the math changes when you're looking at that as a quarterback versus looking at it as trading up for a pass rusher or an offensive tackle.
And what other, how do you see this playing out at the top of the draft? Like we talked a lot about Tennessee earlier, Matt, like they would be the team that if they had the first pick, they would likely trade out as your mock. But how do you see it playing out? Do you think there's other teams that would look at the board the way you do and say, hey, we either have Arvell Reese or Reuben Bain over a quarterback?
I do think that that's possible. Mike, you've been in the room, you've taken these phone calls. I think it's always you have to look at you have to weigh the benefits of if we move back 3 spots, is Arvell Reese still there? Is Reuben Bain still there? And we get an extra first-round pick. So I think the temptation to sit tight and take the best player is always there, but you have to weigh the added benefit of moving back and getting an extra pick, especially if you're the Titans. That roster is so devoid of talent right now, and it's at positions like edge rusher, wide receiver. So, yes, there will be some pressure to just sit and make the pick, but what they really need to do is get as many bites of the apple as possible because it's just not a good roster. And one pick is not going to change that, right? They need a lot of help.
Matt, in the mock, you have the Giants making a deal with the Browns, so they move back and they end up taking an offensive tackle for Miami, Francis Mauigoa. What are your thoughts on Mauigoa as a prospect? What has stood out when you watched him this year at Miami?
Yeah, I mean, he's just rock solid. It's at times boring watching him because he is just so solid. But that's what I want from offensive linemen. Sometimes that's what you want from a defensive tackle as well. He brings that to the game. 6'6", 325 pounds. He is built like a right tackle. He plays with strength. He plays with poise. He has really good recovery agility. So he is a kind of a seamless prospect where you know what you're getting. There's not a lot of projection here. This is not a guy where we're falling in love with athletic traits that maybe haven't matched up. And I know Giants fans are probably a little bit hesitant because of Evan Neal, but Mauigoa is a much more, I think, proven player, and he is someone that has been on the right side. So he is very, very comfortable and familiar in that spot. We're not talking about moving a guy or asking him to learn a position. He's just ready to go.
Can you give us a couple of names that maybe are a little bit under the radar to the audience that you like a lot that maybe in 2 to 3 years we'll look back and be like, wow, they're some of the better players in the draft?
Yeah, I think Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon. I actually was writing him up this morning for an article we have coming out today. He has 8 touchdowns on 36 catches. He doesn't get a ton of targets necessarily, but what he does as almost that joker position, 6'3", 245, he's able to create space. He excels in the red zone because he's so great at the 50-50 ball, the body positioning that he has, the athletic ability to go up and get it. So every week I fall more in love with him. I think he's tremendous. And I know that Jeremiah Love, the running back from Notre Dame, is not under the radar, but I don't think we're giving him enough love as a Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Ashton Jeanty level prospect. If we're taking positional value off the table, Jeremiah Love might be the best player in the entire draft class.
Matt Miller with us here. Last one for me, Matt, because, as a Jet fan, I'm arguing with Jet fans about what they should do at quarterback. Do they get the guy this year? No, they have 3 ones and 27. It's a better class. Wait till then. What are your thoughts on, the 27 quarterback class? Because it feels like every year we say, next year's class is going to be so good, and then it hasn't panned out. I know we talked about it with this year's class already earlier in the conversation here, but what's your take on waiting till next year and if that 2027 quarterback class would actually be a lot better than what is available to potentially the Jets this year?
I mean, I agree with that sentiment depending on what happens with Ty Simpson and what happens with Dante Moore. Next year's class does look like it'll be better. However, can you be bad enough next year to be in the mix for one of those guys, even with the 3 ones next year? You're not guaranteed that you can trade up to that number 1 spot if you don't earn it. Because guess what? Everyone knows how good next year's class is. When you have the quarterbacks and you have Jeremiah Smith and you have Ryan Williams and you're going to have Colin Simmons and Dylan Stewart, the race for number 1 next year is going to be fascinating. And I'm willing to say, 18 months out, whomever has that pick is not going to want to trade it. So the idea of we'll just wait next year and we'll use our 3 first-round picks to move up and get a quarterback, good luck, because whoever's sitting there is going to want to keep that pick and get a generational talent.
And just to wrap up this great college football conversation, what are your thoughts on the upcoming CFP? It feels like everybody has an opinion on this, Matt, of Miami versus Notre Dame. And, besides the obvious, any teams you think deserve to be in that may be on the bubble?
Man, right now, I think it's fascinating to see what's going to happen to a team like Texas, who has lost some games, right? But the wins that they have over Vanderbilt, over Oklahoma, which Texas team would we get if they managed to get in? I'm fascinated by Ohio State. I don't know if anyone can beat Ohio State, just as well-rounded as they are. Julian Sayin is playing just great football right now. So I'm excited. It does feel like it's more of a wide-open race this year than we've seen in years past. But, the Big Ten championship, the SEC championships are going to be a blast to watch because it does feel like it's more of an open field than last year.
Matt, really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much for coming on with us. Great job.
Thanks,
appreciate
Matt.
you guys. Thank you.
Matt Miller with us there, ESPN NFL Draft Analyst. Check out his mock on ESPN.com. And, Mike, I know you and I have alluded to this. Like, say if you're the Jets, you finish with 4 wins this year, right? Next year, if you do go with a bridge option or maybe you don't go quarterback in round 1 and you end up taking someone on day 2 in the draft and, let's say the Jets do show some improvement, they win 6 games. Then you're talking about 10 total wins through the first 2 years for Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji. Are they guaranteed a third year even with those picks in 27? I don't know necessarily if they would be. And then if they are, all of a sudden you got to win right away with a rookie quarterback because you can't have 3 straight losing seasons and get a 4th year. Or, if you do, look at Robert Saleh. He got fired after just 5 games last year, right, at 2-3. So I just think it really muddies the water if the Jets say, let's just wait till 2027 when nothing feels like a guarantee. If you love a guy this year, I say you go out there and get that guy. You got to find your franchise quarterback.
Yeah, look, we talked about it, maybe, you never know. Someone's unexpectedly available in a trade. It could be a combination of things, but absolutely, until you have one, you can't rule out a quarterback. That, I think, of all the things, that's a pretty easy decision.
I would draft like multiple quarterbacks every year till I had one. I don't know, your school of thought on that, but I love the fact that you go back to like the Redskins draft with RG3. They also took Kirk Cousins in that draft. The year that the Niners traded up for Trey Lance, the following year, thank God they took Brock Purdy as Mr. Irrelevant. So to me, until you have that clear franchise quarterback, I see nothing wrong with just keeping your eyes open to adding more year over year.
Yeah, no, that absolutely. So I don't think you just sit here and say, we'll get that guy next year, because you just never know what will happen. There could be another team that has a lot of loss. There's just way too many variables.
Yep, and to your point on that, Mike, I remember a couple of years ago we saw it play out on Hard Knocks with Joe Shane and the Giants. They were at number 6, and they tried to get up to number 2. Washington was not going to make a deal in division, plus they wanted Jaden Daniels. And at number 3, Joe Shane tried to get the 3rd pick from the Patriots, but they wanted Drake May. So I don't care how many picks you have. If the team in front of you also needs a quarterback and they like the quarterback that's available to them, you're not going to be able to get that guy. And that could also be a huge issue for the Jets, even with their 3 first-round picks in 27.
Yeah, that's right. Pay the bill, get your guy, move on.
Mike, as far as the Jet future, we're going to be joined by Matt Miller coming up on our show today at 11:30. He's ESPN's longtime NFL draft analyst. He put out his first mock draft of the season. And, of course, there'll be plenty of mocks from now until the draft in late April. But I want to get your thoughts on this because I know a lot of Jet fans were certainly talking about this week. In the mock, the Jets move up from 5-1, and they make a deal with the Tennessee Titans. And the Jets, after they traded up, they took a quarterback. They took Indiana QB Fernando Mendoza. The package and the cost, I should say, for the Jets to move up and make this deal, according to Matt Miller's projection here, was the New York Jets. They traded away, obviously, their first pick. They did the swap. They traded away the Colts' first rounder, which right now would be pick 28, and the Jets traded away their second-round pick in 2027. One, is that a fair trade as far as point values and what it would take to move up, let's say, from 5-1? And two, your thoughts on the idea of the Jets making that type of move to go up and get their quarterback. In this case, it'd be Fernando Mendoza.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things. So would say the obvious, Jake. If you hit on the quarterback, it's a bargain. If you don't, it's exorbitant. But what I would say is, for Mendoza, I'm comfortable giving up a premium package. We'll speculate between now and April what that really looks like. I think he's Matt Ryan, and when I say that, ironically, it was Eric Mangini, Brian Schottenheimer, and myself who spent a lot of time with Matt Ryan when he came out in 2007. And I see Mendoza as like a similar skill set, like really good arm, good athlete, not like top shelf athlete, and someone that could really lead your franchise not only on the field but just as importantly off the field, Jake. So if you have to give up multiple picks to do it, like from a Jet perspective, wouldn't you be thrilled if it worked out and you had Matt Ryan for a decade?
Oh, 1,000%. I've heard the comp for Mendoza, being, a version of like Jared Goff, and some Jet fans I know were like, really? You're going to trade out for that? I'm like, yeah, are you kidding me? I'd take Jared Goff in 2 seconds. He's proven that if you put the right team around him, he certainly could go out there and play the position at a high level. He's been to a Super Bowl, has led the Lions to a 1 seed. So I'll certainly take Matt Ryan, who's won an MVP. I would take a Jared Goff comp for Mendoza. I guess, Mike, my question really is that what it would take to move up? Because I think that to me is a fair trade. I have no issue with the Jets obviously swapping ones with Tennessee and trading away their first with the Colts, because I look at it like this. You're still keeping your 3 first-round picks in 2027. You're still equipped this year in 2026 with 2 second-rounders to take good players there, or even package some picks and get back into round 1 if there's a player you're specifically targeting. To me, the Jets' offseason needs to be all about figuring out quarterback. There's some Jet fans who don't believe in any of these guys or don't want to trade anything to move up, but I think if you love one of these quarterbacks, I think you have to get him this offseason. Am I off base with that thought?
No, I totally agree, Jake. And what's amazing is like what's going to happen. And you talked earlier in the show about like rivalry week, but think about all that's going to happen in the NFL. Like right now, the season ended today. In the AFC, the following teams would not make the playoffs: Texans, Chiefs, Ravens. I mean, that's unbelievable, right? Like, so a lot's going to happen. And right now, Cleveland and Tennessee would pick before the Jets in the AFC, and depending on how the tiebreakers work out, possibly the Saints and the Giants, because those are also teams with only 2 wins. And by the way, right now, if the season ended today, the Detroit Lions would not be in the playoffs. So I guess all I'm saying is what's fascinating about all this discussion is the team we really got to keep an eye on is Tennessee, and here's why. Of all these teams we'll be talking about, the Browns, certainly the Raiders, the Saints, the Jets, probably not the Giants, just in terms of the quarterback position. So if it's the Titans that wind up with the first pick overall, I think what they're going to do is just hold an auction and get as many good players to surround themselves with, for Cam Ward.
They certainly feel like the team that if, they get the number 1 pick, that's the easiest team to make a deal with. What to you would be your limit, Mike, for moving up? I mean, obviously you have the 5 first-rounders now over the next 2 years. You got 2 2s in this year's draft. But is there a limit in your mind of like, hey, like I'm willing to move up, but I can't trade more than 2 first-round picks, or I can't trade more than this to get up? I mean, every year it seems like the value of what it cost to move up could be different. A couple of years ago, it cost Carolina a ton to go from 9-1 with the Bears, right? They had to trade DJ Moore and multiple firsts and a 2 to go all the way up. I guess it depends just how far the Jets are coming up if they do, or if they do decide to make this type of deal. But as a former GM, Mike, can you walk us through what the conversations are like to try and figure out what the appropriate value would be to move up and get your quarterback?
Yeah. So look, I did that once when we moved up from 17 to 5. We gave up 3 players, but we didn't give up a future one. It's probably harder to do that in this day and age. And again, it really just depends, Jake, on how far are we moving up. If we're going from 3 to 1, I don't want to give up a future first round pick. If I'm going up from 9 or 10 to 1, but I could get, again, Matt Ryan for the next 10 years, yeah, I'm going to give up a future first round pick. So it just all really depends on how far you have to, move up. And to me, like, the certainty of knowing who you have. And to me, like, the other part of it is it's not just who you're having on the field, but, how they're going to be off the field as well.
If you're the Jets, and I think you alluded to this in one of our recent shows, let's say Tennessee does finish with the number 1 pick, Mike. Are you just trying to get up there right away, or are you going to maybe let the process play out in the offseason? You go through some of the veteran options first, or would you be just dead set on, let's get our guy in the draft, let's get up to number 1, and then we'll figure out who we're going to take once we're there?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I don't think there's a reason maybe you don't even look at both. Like, so for example, you look at what happened in Atlanta where, by the way, I was really against what they did initially with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix, but we've talked about this before. Jake, when you're in the post-trade deadline part of the season and you're trying to help your team because you have an injury and you can, add somebody like Kirk Cousins, like, that's really hard and rare to do. And that's all my point is, like, until you have a quarterback, get as much depth as possible. Again, 2 years ago, there were 66 quarterbacks that started a game. I think that number will ultimately be higher this year. Again, just look at, if we were with Cincinnati, I'd be saying, we need a quarterback, just given, the durability issues of Joe Burrow. So I don't think there's any reason why you don't look at, I'm making this up, Mac Jones and, Fernando Mendoza. Like, why not turn a weakness into a strength?
I agree. And I think from a Jet standpoint, Mike, I know you guys played Mark Sanchez right away, but since then, Sam Darnold drafted. They play him right away. Zach Wilson drafted. They play him right away. Sanchez, the only reason why I think it worked with you guys had an outstanding team. I mean, the 08 Jets were 8-3 before Brett Favre got hurt and Mark walked into an unbelievable situation with a great running game and great defense and all that. Yeah, I think from a Jets standpoint, I think ideally you don't necessarily have to play the rookie right away. So I do think adding a veteran quarterback should be a huge priority regardless what the Jets decide to do in the draft.
Yep, totally agree. Like, I think that's a easy decision of all the hard ones they'll have. I can't imagine, there's going to be a lot of people that think like, oh boy, well, we don't need to add a quarterback here.
So just to get you on the record then, Mike, let's say this is the exact deal that Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn are deciding on when the time is right. You trade away pick 5, the Colts pick, which right now, let's say it's pick 28, although I don't know where that ultimately will be. Let's say it's even pick 24 or 25, so it's a little better of a pick in a second next year. That's the cost to go from 5 to 1. Are you making the deal?
Yeah, well, look, if you're saying it's going to be happening, you're going to be joining O's the Mentalist, because there's no way on November 23rd that we're sitting here in mid-April that's going to be the exact scenario. But generally speaking, yes. But I'm just telling you, there's going to be so many things that change and iterate between now and then. I mean, that's what's fun to speculate. But to me, the principle is try to hold on to your future first-round picks to the extent you can. But if you have to pay a little bit of a premium, and again, to me, when I say pay a premium, like what we just talked about, you got to make sure that the character works, that the person that you're acquiring can, be vibrant and successful in New York. And the more you go through it, you realize that's not true for everybody.
Here's a GM question that I'd love to get your thoughts on, Mike, before we break for Rich Cimini coming up. Do GMs value the future first-round picks the Jets would have more, or the Colts pick this year? So, for example, if you could make the deal and you use the Colts pick this year, would you do that? Or what if Tennessee's we want one of your firsts in 2027? Would you rather part with one of your 3 in 27, or make sure it's just your first that you have this year and protect those 2027 first-round assets?
Yeah, no, I mean, you really, if you think about it, you rather kick the can down the road, because if you get a quarterback, the theory is you're going to play better, and that first will be lower.
Interesting. Okay, that to me would make some sense there. So you protect the 27 assets, and you get your quarterback this offseason.
Yeah, because the theory, you feel is look, if we make reasonable progress, I'm making this up. Let's say the Jets win 4 games this year. You come in with a rookie next year in 26, and you win, a couple more games. But there's going to be bumps in the road with the new quarterback. And then you hopefully hit your stride by his second year, which is typically when you see a lot of improvement, which is the first full off season for a quarterback. Then you're hoping our quarterback, our first round pick, then should be lower.